Alright everybody, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Other FIFA podcast here on French Island. It's not just myself though, I'm joined again by Branson Gibson to cover all things Australian football, and as always, it's been a huge week. Well, actually 2 weeks, let's be honest, Brant, because last week here on the island, we had that huge storm that everyone in Victoria actually had to deal with. We lost power for a little bit, it delayed an episode, then the long weekend, then getting carried away coming back to work. It's been fairly chaotic. A lot has happened in the last kind of 2 weeks, but how have you been, mate?
I've been good. I've been good for the most part. As you said, yeah, man, that storm was pretty wild. It sort of put a spanner in the podcast recording works. Bit unfortunate for Mother Nature to just, impact us like that. But, that's the way it goes. But, mate, firstly, I just want to say it's not just the two of us. It's not just you and me. We're also joined by your mustache, mate, because this is a new edition. So you've subbed the beard off, beard out, mustache in. Talk me through it.
So my partner and I are getting married in January. She's never seen me without the beard, and I thought this is really the last chance to let her see that before we're locked into a marriage, effectively. So I thought I'd do it, and I thought I'd use it at the same time to try and raise some money for Movember. So link is pinned on my Twitter. I think it's also pinned on the French Island Twitter at the moment as well. We have called this the Movember episode because you're, of course, rocking a level of mustache that I hope to get to by the end of the month. But yeah, definitely trying to raise some money for men's health, mental health, prostate cancer, testicular cancer, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, by all means, if you can, go and throw a little donation in there because we'll be chipping in as well. But fingers crossed for a good cause, because otherwise there's no reason for me to look as absolutely horrific and filthy as I do at the moment.
Not at all, mate. I love it. I'm excited to talk about some football, not just your facial hair, mate, but football. There's lots to talk about. Lots of international football. The Matildas were in action. The Socceroos are coming up as well. Plenty of A-League men's stuff to discuss. I'm just looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And fantastic to see football back in Australia again. Like we haven't had that much of it over the last few months while we've been waiting for the A-League to kind of get its stuff sorted. But I guess that kind of takes us into the headlines of the week, if you don't mind, Branson. Do you want to recap those first two games? We'll talk through the Matildas and Brazil, and you can give us the results for each of those matches.
Well, absolutely. We talked about it on our most recent episode. Those two big games coming up. The Matildas returning to Australian soil. Their first game in Australia in, I think it was almost 2 years. There were fans. There was fantastic. It was at, I think it's Combank, sorry, not Bankwest Stadium now. But it was just great to see. The two clashes, Australia won the first one 3-1. The second was a thrilling 2-2 draw. What did you make of these two games? Because, of course, they were friendlies, so there wasn't necessarily anything on the line. Not much to play for, but given the way that the Matildas performed at the Olympics were weird in terms of it was both successful in the fact that the Matildas finished, fourth? It was their highest ever finish at an Olympics, first time they'd made the semi-finals. However, it still seems somewhat underwhelming. So there was still lots of questions that we're hoping to get answers from for the Matildas moving forward to the 2023 World Cup. Shaun, what did you make of our performances in these two games? 1 win, 1 draw.
Yeah, look, Brazil are good, and it was a much better Brazil side and lineup than I think the one that toured 12 months ago or 18 months ago, or whenever they last come across, and we absolutely smacked them like 5-1 or something like that in a couple of different games. One was in Adelaide, of course, I think, during that little run. So it was a much stronger Brazil lineup, and I think they need to be respected because they're also trying to prepare for the same tournaments that we are effectively. They're still going through a qualification campaign, their own South American Championships, trying to get back here for the World Cup in 2023. So I think in a way, it was a really good hit out because it was high quality opposition. But at the same time, I do think in some of the performances, a lot of the similar issues that we saw in the Olympics and that we've seen in previous friendlies did kind of rear their heads again, where we are very, very open in all facets of play. Like from the first minute through to the 90th, we are very open. And then the other portion as well, which I think has been pretty common sort of, I guess, criticism since Tony G kind of took over, is that our breakneck style kind of runs out of pace at certain points and it leaves us open for teams to come back into. So I think the 3-1 victory was fantastic, a very good performance. Arguably, I think the best performance of the Tony G era, even including the Olympics results in that. And then at the same time, I think it was also really elevated by the fact that we had a home crowd for the first time forever. You could see how much it meant to the players. You could see how much it meant to the fans that were there. The Brazil support, shout out to them. I thought they were fantastic. A lot of expats that were there at both the games. But then really that 2-2 draw, we were actually 2 goals up in that match, and you could really see the team playing that breakneck speed and having a lot of the same starting lineup play both games 4 days apart. Really, that fatigue element kind of came into it. And that means that when we go into tournament type environments like the Olympics, like at the upcoming World Cup as well, we really need to have a certain style that allows us to kind of take our foot off the pedal a little bit and really like kind of get our breath back and let ourselves back into the game, because as excellent certain individual performances were, and we'll talk about them more in a moment, really letting a team back in when you're 2-0 up at home, that's a cause for concern a little bit, albeit a very good Brazil side and a side that had pretty raucous support on the night. But what were your thoughts and feelings on the actual results themselves?
I thought they were good results in a way. Like, yeah, again, the 3-1 result, I thought that was a fantastic game. Even the 2-2 one, while of course it's unfortunate to cop 2 goals, as you said, I thought the way that we attacked in that game was fantastic. I just thought it was beautiful. I mean, I don't want to sound corny or anything, but we just looked so dangerous going space, some of the freedom, some of the runs, some of the passing. It was just so fluid, and it looked dangerous and it was effective. So I thought that was very impressive. Defensively, as you pointed out, there have been lots of issues. I think maybe with this second game, we might have seen, because it was a friendly, maybe that had a bit of an impact on the result in terms of, if it was a competitive game, 2-0 up, you might have seen Australia shut up shop a little bit more. I thought that maybe because there wasn't necessarily anything on the line, that they might have remained a little bit more open than they otherwise would have. Had there been something on the line, they might have parked the bus a little bit more. That's what I thought, but it is concerning. I think, what is it now? The Matildas have not kept a single clean sheet with Tony G in charge. Is that right, Shaun?
I think that's correct, yeah.
So, yeah, obviously that's not ideal. I thought attacking-wise, we were very, very good. Claire Polkinghorne opened the scoring in both games as well. So I think overall there are definitely positives to take away from it. I think, the Olympics, we sort of came away with more questions than answers. These 2 games, I don't think every answer has been provided, but I do think it was 2 steps, generally speaking, in the right direction.
Yeah, and I would also kind of highlight that I think playing with 4 at the back was massive improvement. I think.
Oh yes.
Give him a ton of credit. Like, I think Tony G looked at what we did poorly in the in the friendlies prior to the Olympics, and then what didn't really work for us in the Olympics. And I think he's made that adjustment. So you got to give him a ton of credit there, because I've been critical previously of that. But the big positive is, one, the girl that you can see on the screen at the moment, Mary Fowler, was absolutely fantastic across both games. The future's very, very bright for her at only 19 years of age. And then the other player that was again fantastic and is arguably playing at the highest level of any of our Matildas, Ellie Carpenter, again phenomenal. 2 players that you think are going to be like real key elements of our 2023 side, and then again into the future as well. So yeah, future is still incredibly bright. We're still unearthing some great young talent that's getting brought into the team. So yeah, hopefully it is a turn in the right direction. They have also announced, Brian, 2 huge fixtures that actually came out today at time of recording, where Matildas are going to be playing the US women's national team in Sydney in late November, and then in Newcastle as well. So if you're in either of those areas, get vaccinated, get yourself tickets, get along to those matches, because they're going to be absolutely huge. But we'll jump on to the next headline, because it's a doozy, Brand. Do you want to talk us through this one?
Yeah, so we saw last week some big news coming out of Adelaide United. Josh Cavallo as well made a major announcement. During the week, he came out and posted a video and a statement in which he announced, or came out as gay. He is the first male openly gay professional footballer anywhere in the world. So it's a phenomenal announcement, a very brave move, one that, when I heard that he was the first openly gay male professional player, it was sort of shocking in a way. When you think, it's 2021, how is this the case? How have we not had someone someone come out before this? So I think the fact that he was able to be the first and make that step is incredible. What do you think?
Yeah, phenomenal. I think Andy Brennan had previously come out, but was at the
Yeah.
time playing at NPL level. He did also have a spell in the A-League with, I think, the Newcastle Jets, and has been at
Correct.
South Hobart and South Melbourne and Bentley Greens and I think Hume City at the moment. So, like there was a little bit of a precedent set. There's also Thomas Hitzelsberger, who was a German international that actually came out after his career ended. He played at Aston Villa in the early 2000s. But this is the first active player while they're playing in their career, really at the start, only 21 years of age for Josh. And look, I think the way it was presented was fantastic. I think Josh deserves a ton of credit for, one, his candor and the way that he kind of disclosed and talked through his story and wanting to really be the most authentic version of himself. I think it was brilliantly presented by Adelaide United, where it wasn't like... There were no emojis on the tweet or anything foolish like that. There were no hashtags. It was just like Josh's story, and that was it. They presented that as being a representation of the player and his life, and what a big milestone this is for him, rather than having it be about them as a club or anything like that. So huge credit to Adelaide United. And then just the way it's been reported, and I think received by the majority of fans within soccer Twitter, has been fantastic as well. I know Joey Lynch and Vince Rigari both did phenomenal articles about it. That included quotes directly from Josh himself about how much it meant to him and how, open and accepting the majority of his teammates, coaches and club had been, which is phenomenal. And the vast majority, and I'm not on Facebook, so I only see Twitter, has been positive within soccer Twitter as well, particularly within the Australian community. There's always going to be that toxic element on social media for people that hide behind fake accounts or international accounts or whatever else that are going to post things because there aren't any repercussions. But the majority of the people are rightly applauding him for having the bravery to be the first person to come out and do it. And hopefully it is life-changing for a lot of people that might be gay within football and don't feel comfortable just yet. They now have a role model and someone that's visible, that's going to be in the public eye, that is openly out and proud. And then, hopefully down the track it saves lives for some certain people who perhaps feel ostracised because they don't see that representation in football, or they don't see that representation in mainstream media the way that it should be. So phenomenal news. A huge credit to Josh. I think he carried himself fantastically well, and hopefully it's a feel-good story. And weirdly to say, hopefully in 12 months' time, Bram, we look back at this podcast and say, well, that's kind of like quaint that we used to think that was a big deal, because hopefully it does normalise that process for a lot of people. And we're, of course, fully supportive of everyone across the whole sexuality spectrum, or whatever you want to call it, on French Island as well. But any big takeaways from you on your end?
I just think the fact that he's come out he's stepped into that sort of role model role, I guess. Sorry, that's not a great way of putting it, but you can't be what you can't see. So the fact that for people within the gay community and within the footballing community, it provides a role model, it provides an example where people can know that they're not alone, and then people can, express themselves in their truest form. I think that's fantastic. And I think the other thing that was phenomenal was the reach that Josh Cavallo's announcement got. It wasn't just within, the Australian football community. It was truly global. We saw Jurgen Klopp talking about it at a press conference. I'm looking at the tweet as we speak. Tottenham Hotspur, EA Sports, FIFA, Everton, the Victory were on there. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Birmingham City. Like, this is just to name a few. Robbie Fowler, Stoke City. I'm just scrolling through here, looking at all the different people who within the footballing world who were able to comment and show messages of support, and it's phenomenal. Juventus women, it's crazy. The amount of reach and the amount of support around the world is fantastic to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the big credits as well to him is that he proved himself to be a fantastic footballer well before this announcement. I think he actually won last season, like the Adelaide Members Player of the Year. So he's proven his ability on the pitch, and now he gets to kind of carry on and be a hero to even more people off the pitch as well. So fantastic work to him, and we hope he goes on to bigger and better things this season. But as one career continues to blossom, Bram, we have seen the curtain come down on another. Let's jump through that third headline. Do you want to walk us through this one?
Yeah, well, this was a bit of a surprising announcement. We got word last week or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember what week it was now because we've missed that episode. But Adam Federici, who had previously been announced by Macarthur FC as their club captain, he came out rather shockingly and announced his retirement from professional football, which certainly came as a bit of a shock considering, what was it, maybe a month beforehand, Macarthur had announced him as their club captain for the upcoming season. He did say in his announcement that he was retiring due to injury. I believe it was a knee injury. I thought I might have read somewhere else, but he said that was sort of the main reason as to why He was announcing his retirement. Couldn't have come at worse timing for us either, mate. I think it was like 2 days after we published our episode with the Macarthur season preview. We sung high praises of Federici. We thought he would be a fantastic captain, that they would be able to tap into that wealth of experience. He was one of the best goalkeepers last year, so we got made to look a little bit silly. So thanks, Adam, for stitching us up there. But what do you think of this? Is there, and also, sorry, as a follow-up question, is there more to read into this? Because it did come after Macarthur just got drubbed 5-0 in a pre-season friendly against Sydney FC. So it's maybe slightly suspicious timing there, but also there's a little bit of unrest at Macarthur.
Yeah. First and foremost, I think I called him the best goalkeeper and most underrated player in the league last week, and then of course he retires 2 days later. So I'm never going to say that about anyone ever again. But yeah, like he's a very good player. So we want to give him huge congratulations, a phenomenal career with the likes of Reading, Bournemouth, a whole bunch of other clubs in the lower leagues in the UK, and spend time, of course, in the Premier Division as well. So like a fantastic career. I don't think he necessarily needed to come back and play in the A-League for financial reasons, but obviously wanted to bring his family back here, wanted to be local to Sydney, where I think he's from originally. So a fantastic career, Adam. Well done if you happen to be watching. The interesting part, and you kind of alluded to it there, is that this is a rolling kind of series of issues. It's been rumoured on soccer Twitter for a while that one club in particular hasn't had a vaccine mandate for their players, which is then going to limit their ability to travel interstate, which is then going to limit their ability to play against certain teams that do have fully vaccinated squads at certain points, or certain teams that may potentially have people that are immunocompromised in their lives that don't want to increase their frequency of interaction with anti-vax people. And then Gino Mara, one of their chair people, I'm not sure if he's the actual chairman or if he's just on the board itself, came out and said, actually, we've not had any discussions with any of our players about getting vaccinated, which to me seems ridiculous given the current climate that we're in and the current expectations around sporting teams. And then heavily rumoured, this is not fact, please do not take it as such, that Ante Milicic is one of the people that isn't getting vaccinated. And when you go through Macarthur's social media and they look at all the photos of their training and all that sort of stuff, he actually hasn't been pictured at their training sessions at any point throughout the course of their pre-season. That could just be coincidence, but usually at some point or another, if you go through social media for any of the sides in the A-League, if they're taking training photos, they usually include one of the boss. So I think it's fascinating there. There was heavily rumoured that like Tommy Juric previously had some issues with not wanting to get vaccinated. He's in those photos. A couple other players where it was rumoured as well that are also in those photos, like Jordan Much and whoever else. But the coach not appearing is a big one. There's no word as to whether the coaching team was actually there for that heavy defeat to Sydney FC. They did lose that game. They have lost other preseason matches as well. And we spoke about last week how heavy in their recruitment has been. But if their off-field issues aren't resolved or actually turn out to be true, then yeah, there are some big red flags over Macarthur in their season. They've lost their captain. They just lost one of their assistant managers as well in Mark Milligan, who stepped down from his role in the lead up to the season. So yeah, I don't know, man. Like it could be a really interesting one to see how Macarthur's remaining preseason goes, and then what sort of lineup they actually have in only 20 days, I think it is, until their first game of the season. So many twists and turns if you're a fan in the bullpen at the moment. But what were some of your thoughts, or what have you heard?
Well, that Milligan one was interesting as well, because that's something that stood out to me. Vince Regari, Sydney Morning Herald, wrote an article about it as well, pretty much saying that he had apparently walked out on the club. So he was their captain last year, had apparently agreed this year to step into a coaching role as an assistant. Apparently as well, there was ambitions of him one day taking over from Ante Milicic, and then just before the season, he's left the club. So why is that? Who knows? We don't know. But it's not great. I don't necessarily think it's alarm bells, but it's far from ideal. And if I was a Macarthur fan, it would be somewhat concerning if you're losing some of these key pieces. Milligan, who was your inaugural captain, ambitions of him one day transitioning into your coach, and then he walks out before even the season has started of him being an assistant. I think that's maybe, we don't know why. Could be any reason why he's done that, but it's not exactly ideal.
Yeah, if you look at the things in silo, like on their own, It's not like that a 5-0 friendly defeat. Who knows? Could have been any lineup. They had Mark Milligan leave, but Mark Milligan's been pretty active as a pundit in like Socceroos matches and looks like he's going to be a key element of Paramount and Ten's coverage this season. Adam Federici, knee injury, like it could happen at any point. I don't know if it was an injury or if he's just struggling to overcome an existing injury or what it is. But then you wedge all those things into a week and you wedged those things in advance of the rumours that we've kind of been hearing rumbling about Macarthur in the off-season. And yeah, they do all start to kind of link together a little bit. So it could all just be coincidence. It could be fascinating, but we'll see how that closes out. And of course, it makes our season preview for them last week absolutely redundant as well. But now we're going to jump into another season preview, Branson, because we continue down the table and we head to the Wellington Phoenix. They did, of course, have a pretty excellent season last year, finished in 7th spot, missing out on the finals by one singular point. There was perhaps a Ulysses De Villa penalty miss that Wellington Phoenix fans don't want us to mention in the closing stages of the end of last season. There was also a big Jordan Much miss that kind of went their direction as well. So 6-1, half a dozen the other. They finished just behind Macarthur, who we discussed about, and they were undefeated in their last 11 games, including two of those fixtures taking place in New Zealand with two of the biggest crowds that the league saw last year in the COVID environment. So an up and down season for them, a season of missed opportunities, a season of potentially where it took them a little while to get going. But given the constraints they were under playing in Australia, training and playing and living out of Wollongong as opposed to in Wellington last season, I would look at it as being a relatively successful year for the Knicks. What were some of your thoughts on their season last year, and where do you think they would have been potentially, thinking their season went?
I agree. I think it was relatively successful. I think given the obstacles that they had to face, it would have been not inexcusable, but it would have been a very obvious excuse if they'd had a shocker to just be like, look, everything we've had to overcome, playing out of Wollongong rather than New Zealand. And, for the players themselves, that would be tricky. They'd be somewhat used to it maybe with international camps and that sort of stuff. But it's more than just the players that have to make the adjustment. Obviously, it's the coaches, it's the assistant coaches, but then it's, your physios, your trainers, the social media team, all that sort of background staff as well. So it would have been very easy, I think, if they just folded, or not folded, sorry, as in folded the club, as if they'd sort of conceded last year as a write-off and had been non-competitive. And they weren't great to start off the season, but they were absolutely able to turn things around. As you said, undefeated in their last 11. I think they had 6 wins in that stretch as well. And they only just missed out on the finals. They had a couple of crucial games late on when they had a chance to make the top 6. So I think it has to be a relatively successful year for sure. I mean, obviously they would have wanted to make the finals, but I think overall a good year.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they did still have really bright spots in the season last year. I think I mentioned it earlier, but the two crowds that they had in Wellington and Auckland for their two New Zealand games at the end of last season, like that was as vibrant and as loud I've ever seen any Wellington support throughout their time in the A-League. So fantastic to see the team and the country, I guess, the whole country of New Zealand getting around them, given that they were in both countries, but definitely something that they'll want to try and build on this season. Of their highlights last season, what do you think was perhaps the biggest one, or the thing that they look back on most fondly, or try and do a little bit more effectively this year?
Well, initially, the thing that jumped out to me as their season highlight was a 5-0 win over Western United. Mark Rudan, was he in charge at that stage, or had he been sacked? I can't remember.
I think he was. It was very late in the season that he actually moved on. He was going to close out the year.
Yeah, so a 5-0 win over Mark Rudan and Western United. A bit of a grudge there, obviously. That to me sort of stood out as a really big statement win. Western United weren't necessarily that good, but to put 5 past them, to pump them, if I was a Knicks fan, that would have been immensely, immensely satisfying. But the other one that you mentioned that I had totally forgotten about was the fact that, those 2 games played in New Zealand and the crowds and the turnout there, that had totally slipped my mind. But since you've mentioned that, that would have had to have been a season highlight for the Knicks fans in general, who had spent so long without being able to go and watch their club. And then the fans as well, who, while they had, the Mexican squad that followed around Sevilla, while they had, Wollongong get on board a little bit, to actually have a passionate, full stadium there to support you, that would have been incredible. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other highlight that they'll look back on is that they actually brought through some good talent last season as well. Guys like Sam Sutton and Ben Wayne and a few young players that have really kind of stepped up. And they're definitely, I think, leaning into like becoming more of a development club for a lot of talented young New Zealand talent. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out this season, but still plenty for them to be positive about, even though they didn't make finals. It was by like a couple of missed kicks, a couple of odd bounces here and there. They definitely would have been in the conversation again. Flip side of the coin, though, what do you think their greatest frustration would have been last season, and what do you think they'll be looking to improve upon most this year?
I think the restrictions that they had, and this is a bit of a weird one, so just sort of hear me out. I think the fact that they had those obstacles would be so frustrating because we saw towards the end of the year how good they can be. So if they were playing in New Zealand, if they didn't have those same sort of travel restrictions, if they didn't have to overcome everything that they faced, how good could their season have been? I think that's the kind of thing, that great unknown where had they not been, forced to overcome so much, maybe their early season form would have been that little bit better. Maybe that would have resulted in them, making the finals, and then who knows what happens from there. Maybe Davia stays, maybe a couple of other players stay. Maybe they're I don't know. It's sort of that great unknown, I think, would be frustrating. What about you?
No, look, I'd agree definitely, because I think that the element that we kind of touched on, the coaching staff and the support staff and whatever else, but they were away from their families. If they've got kids, they're away from their kids. If they still live at home, they're away from their parents. Like, just the how easy it is to wake up in your own bed and then get up and play a football match. Like, that's infinitely easier than staying in a hotel or an Airbnb, or I don't know if they were using any of the University of Wollongong dorm accommodation, but something like that is a huge challenge. They have changed. Unfortunately, again, they're having to do it again this season because the bubble hasn't quite been reopened between New Zealand and Australia just yet. But again, they've made that adjustment. They've made that sacrifice. They're going to be playing closer to Sydney with still some games in Wollongong, other games littered around the Sydney area as well. So hopefully it's not for the full season. I think hopefully they can get more matches at home. Those two that we've already mentioned were highlights of the A-League season last year. If they can get close to like 5, 6, maybe even 10 games this year, if our borders can all get sorted, that would be huge for them. But I think they deserve a ton of credit for the way that they're played. They do have a bit of work to do though, Branson, because they've got quite a few players on this out list that I'm going to recap for you now. So Stephen Taylor has obviously retired and is apparently, allegedly, still training somewhere in the Middle East. We'll see if that comes to fruition in anything, given that he was announced as captain, similar to Federici, and then retired shortly after, which is crazy. Tamir Hamed has made the move to Western Sydney Wanderers. Ulysses Devere, of course, we spoke about last week, makes the move to Macarthur. Cammy Devlin makes the move over to Hearts in Scotland. He's already had a pretty decent start to his little career in the SPL over there. Luke Devere, ex-Brisbane Roar, ex a couple other teams as well, has been released. T. Atwai, Hudson Wahongi, I butchered the pronunciation, but we're going to barrel on through. He's been released. NPL star Charles Lokaloi Ngoy has also been released. Liam McGing, Mirza Muradovic, Matthew Riddington, and Stefan Marinovic have all departed the club as well, yet to sign for other teams. A couple of big names in there, a couple of players that they would have considered as their stars, a few marquee and visa fixtures or visa players in there in that group. Which of those kind of players that we've run through there looms as being the biggest one that they have to replace for you this offseason?
Well, the biggest one is Devere, because I don't know how you necessarily replace him. He was the best player in the league, I thought, last year. So how do you go about replacing that? I'm not sure. Like, it's not as easy as one in, one out. There's certainly massive, massive shoes to fill there. Tommy Hammond, Tomo Hammond as well. He was their leading goal scorer last year too. So the fact that he's left the club, he was good. He was able to come in, he scored goals pretty much straight away as well. He was a good target for him. He was effective in front of goals and he was able to convert. So losing him as well, that's going to be a big one. Stephen Taylor is an odd one. It's sort of a little bit, reminds me a little bit of Bobo and Lafondra coming back to Sydney. But we've both seen those two players stay on. Who was it as well for Adelaide United, who's just re-signed? We said it in the preview last week. Club stalwart. What's his name?
Isaias? Is that who you're after?
Yeah. Yes. Came back and stayed. That's it. Sorry, thank you. It was on the tip of my tongue. So we've seen some of those, club stalwarts come back and then stay. So Stephen Taylor came back and then left straight away. So I think that's maybe a little bit odd. What do you
Yeah,
think?
they did release like a statement after he departed as well, like kind of trying to clarify some rumors or whatever else. And I
Yeah,
feel like,
because he
yeah, go for
wasn't
it.
he wasn't fluttering in saying why he left or whatever. And the fact that
Yeah,
a club releases a statement after a player retires, sort of trying to defend their reputation about why he retired, yeah, it's a bit
yeah.
odd.
I didn't actually hear any criticism from him. Maybe it was more prevalent on the New Zealand side than the Australian side, but I actually didn't hear the original criticism that he apparently had. The first I heard about it was the Wellington Phoenix statement, which in a lot of scenarios and situations, and people can let us know in the comment section below or over on Twitter, like I didn't actually hear about anything until Wellington brought it up, if that makes sense. And that just kind of makes them
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like a little bit jilted, like a little bit like, they feel that they've been hard done by, when in truth, I don't 100% think. Like sometimes these things happen and things don't work out with a player, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think he played so little last year because he was injured. He was obviously in the IPL at the start of the season, then came back mid-year, didn't play all that much. They had difficulty really filling different players in that position at centre back. That was obviously a big key area for them last year. So I don't think that many Wellington fans would have been that upset about it, really. But again, I don't know, that we might get corrected on that one. But yeah, he's obviously long pins and the what were they? The Sea-Doo gang
Skis?
or the jet ski
Oh,
gang or whatever we're calling them over there in Wellington. He's a big loss to Mehmet. I think was fantastic at various points last season. Definitely has quality. Maybe doesn't get the support that he needed last year, and maybe that's why they had some of those scoring issues earlier on in the season. And then De Vea is one of probably the top 5 players in the competition at the moment, so he's a big
and
loss as
then
well.
and then Devlin as well. We
Yeah,
haven't mentioned him as well. Going over to Hearts and doing well.
doing very well. And again, like another young talent that they probably would have looked to build their team around for the next 4 or 5 seasons. But on that, we're going to jump into players in. So it's another return, Bran. It's Gary Hooper making the return from India, again re-signing within the A-League. There's something about players coming and going lately, which has been a little bit weird. Callan Elliott also returns to the Knicks. He was one of the players that went over to Xanthi in second division Greece under Tony Popovic. Decent fullback option. Nicholas Pennington's joined. He could be a fascinating prospect. He is technically Italian, I think, but potentially an Australian youth international. Came through the Roma Academy. Was at Cagliari, a couple of other different places over in the lower divisions of Italy as well. He looks to be potentially quite a quality player, still only 21 years of age. And then Ben Old and Alex Paulson have also been brought in. They were part of the, not Ollie Roos, Ollie Whites, I think they call them, the New Zealand Olympic squad. And they've been promoted from the Knicks Academy into the first team lineup. So a couple of big names coming back in, but still a few different spots I think they need to strengthen further. Of those 5 names that we've read out, which one do you think is the most fascinating and which one do you think is most critical to the Knicks' chances this year?
I think probably the most critical is going to be Gary Hooper. I think, losing Hemed, their top goal scorer, De Vea was their second leading goal scorer as well, so they're both gone. Hooper was okay with the Knicks. I think he scored 8 goals in 21 games with them. So, again, not an amazing return, but, that's still pretty solid. So I think, obviously, it's football. You need to score goals. So Gary Hooper's going to be their man for that. He's going to have to do it. Callan Elliott as well, I think that's probably... no, maybe not fascinating. I think that's a good get to get him back at the Knicks. Went over to Xanthi. I don't think he made an appearance for them the whole time he was over there. So, the fact that he left in the first place, went to Europe, under Popovic and all that, he clearly had the talent. I don't think that was, any stretch for him to make that leap. Didn't get that shot. He's come back to the Knicks. So I think that's a good get for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by them because Gary Hooper actually dovetailed really well with David Ball when they were both playing together 2 seasons ago in Wellington. But then at that point, Ben Waine hadn't really come onto the scene, and I think he's going to be someone that they'll probably expect to build more around this year than they did last year. He was off the bench for the first 6 seasons. The Waine train left the station. He started to get more starts. There was a whole bunch of different stuff with that. I think it'll be interesting to see if potentially Waine and Hooper play up top together, and then maybe Ball plays on the right-hand side, Piscopo on the left, if they can keep Piscopo fit. So I think they're really buying into the idea that they're going to have players like... Pennington's a good example, a young player that they're going to try and develop at 21 years of age, like Callan Elliott that you've mentioned, like Reno Piscopo, like Ben Waine, that they're really going to try and build around. That's on top of the likes of Sam Sutton, who I thought was fantastic last season. A couple other young players that they're really bringing into that squad as well, like Ben Old, like Alex Paulson, who have a good track record at New Zealand youth international level, but haven't really made that jump to permanent or long ongoing senior football. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with their last month of like the off season, because it will potentially, I think, set them up to either go and get further visa players that they're going to try and bring in, or alternatively, they will then look to really try and develop that youth further and really try and bring through the next generation of New Zealand talent. So if that's what they want to be, it's working well for Adelaide, it's working pretty well for Brisbane at the moment. It's not the worst idea in the world, but I don't know if it's going to disenchant certain elements of their fan base if they do get back to New Zealand. So we'll see how that goes for them, but it definitely does feel like a squad potentially with a couple of issues still. Their coach, of course, Ufuk Talay, their captain was Stephen Taylor until he retired. They haven't made an announcement on who's going to take over from him. But we've gone through their squads and their list and whatever else, but what are some of the areas of improvement that you think they'll be setting out to try and do better with this off-season?
Well, I think one thing that would really serve them well to improve in next year would be their early season form. We mentioned, they were undefeated in their last 11 games. They finished strong, but weren't quite able to make the finals. Last year, they only had one win in their first 8 games. They lost 5 of their first 8 as well. So they really dug themselves a hole. And again, playing in Wollongong, that was very early in terms of the adjustments that they had to make to playing in an entirely different country, getting the whole system set up, finding the best way to organise, just how the club's going to operate. So it's understandable it's understandable that they struggled early last year. However, it cost them. So I think this year, if they want to make the finals, not being in a hole to start off the year is going to be crucial. Having to chase the entire year, I think that's pretty taxing. So I think that would be a key area for them to focus on early to hopefully set them up for success for the rest of the year. But what about you?
Look, much the same, to be honest. I think they need to get off to a good start. I think they need to get some of that young talent bedded in their starting 11 very early in the season. Otherwise, if they're still trying to chop and change and figure out their best 11 5 games into the season, 2 months into the season, like 3 months into the season, that's going to be a real challenge for them, because I don't think they've got competitive depth. I think they've got a good 11, and I think if they can get that 11 out there, it's going to be competitive. But if they lose a couple of players here or there, if they don't solve their best defensive partnership, which could potentially be a couple of different players that they played at centre-back last year, I think that's going to be an issue for them. So the hope is that they settle early, they get some good results and some points on the board early, and then they can kind of just continue motoring along throughout the course of the year. Membership pitch though, Bran, if you're a Wellington Phoenix fan, who's of course probably in New Zealand and unable to support the team directly at the moment, what sort of pitch would you be making to them to sign up for either a distance membership or just really to support the team in some way or another ahead of the new season?
Well, so if I was New Zealand based, I would try to say, just show your support, because they need it. I mean, the club's doing it tough in terms of having to play away from home, all the obstacles that brings, as you mentioned, like, the support staff, families, everything there. If you can do what you can to help, that's obviously really good. But the big thing that I would say as well is the Knicks seem to be really good in terms of engagement and reward or return for investment for their members and stuff like that as well. We saw last year in Wollongong, they had, Wollongong Appreciation Month, where they had a special Wollongong kit that matched the theme of the Knicks' home kit. Anyway, it was red. They had a bunch of good initiatives to sort of give back to the Wollongong community for all the support that they were shown. And then we saw later in the year, when they were able to return and play in New Zealand, that they had massive crowds. They were able to put on a pretty mega spectacle for those members in New Zealand. So I think that the Knicks show great return for effort, if that makes sense, for their fans. So I think that, if you support them, they'll give back. So I think that's a good element. If not quite a membership pitch, I think that's a good touch.
Yeah, and I think the Wollongong Fire Chicken kit from last season was one of the best A-League kits offered throughout the course of the year. I like white shorts. I don't know what it is about white shorts, but any kit that has them tends to go pretty well. They start their season, their round 1 fixture against Macarthur on Sunday, the 21st of November at 6:15 p.m. Available on Paramount Plus and Channel 10. And if you can get along to it, by all means, go and check that one out as well. But Branson, we're going to try and place these guys in the power rankings. We've kind of spoken in glowing terms about certain aspects, and then also some criticisms as well at the same time. Where do you think Wellington sit compared to some of the other teams that we've kind of spoken about over the last few weeks?
I think they're going to find it tough. I think, again, like a few other clubs, their outs are more substantial than their ins. They've lost a number of big name players. I don't think they've been able to address those directly yet. That there's still chance for transfers. I think we've seen doing the rounds on Twitter. Pretty much every club still has at least one visa slot available as well. So there is still, plenty of time, there's still the possibility, at least, that they will make an addition that could, reshape the squad or add to any sort of areas that need topping up. As far as the power rankings go, definitely think they're above the Mariners. Definitely think they're above the Mariners. What do you think? I think it's doom and gloom for the Mariners, to be honest. I think they've lost so many players after punching so far above their weight. I think Wellington, my expectations are that they will be above the Mariners, but to be honest, I don't think they're going to be much higher than that.
I would not put them above the Mariners. I think everyone's been quite harsh on the Mariners, and fairly so, because Stajic isn't involved and they've lost a couple of players here and there. But I think the outs at Wellington...
More than a couple.
Yeah, more than a couple. But, the outs at Wellington, to me, seem like they're more critical than their outs at Central Coast. Like, they've lost their two highest scorers. They've lost, arguably, their best defender. They haven't quite replaced them. They've lost their best midfield prospect in Cam Devlin. And I don't think... There's unproven stuff. Wellington could go out there and prove me wrong. They've got that stability in coaching structure, which I think is different to the Mariners. I think at the moment we're arguing between 6th or 7th for them, right? I don't think we think they're above Adelaide in any way. Is that right?
Oh no, I don't. But yeah. I'm gonna go with you. You've convinced me. You've touched on something there where I think let's reward the Mariners for being successful last year. They did finish. Did they finish third? They did finish third.
They did finish third.
So. Yeah. While I think they're going to fall off, we've got to give them their dues. So, all right, cool.
Yeah, it's a nice easy one. The fascinating part will be the Mariners, I think, have maybe a little bit better a team, but a rookie manager, which could change everything. Wellington have now a very experienced manager in Tale, but perhaps not the better squad than Central Coast. No. If they could still turn around, as you mentioned, in the last 2 weeks, and they need to get moving because I think they're at time of release, it'll be 16 days to the kickoff of their season, and then they've got to do a 2-week quarantine at some point. So if they're going to make signings, they need to make them relatively quickly to get those players involved.
The window's closed as well, so they have to be free agents as well now.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that is correct. And I think it opens again at the end of December or something like that. So it's not actually that many games that you play unless you are going to sign a player, but who are they going to pay money for? But yeah, a lot to be excited about for them. They've also got the A-League women's side coming in, or AL Dub, or whatever we're saying. So yeah, plenty to be excited about for Wellington. I hope they prove us wrong. I hope they're the team that is actually higher on this power ranking at the end of the season. But Branson, that does take us in to our Hall of Fame, and it is a day of celebration because I've overturned what has been a horrific run of results for me. Thank you to the 13 people that voted. Obviously, the last week's podcast was focused mainly on the FFA Cup, and we put two of the best FFA Cup avians to the test with the FFA Cup and the FFA Cup Seagull. The FFA Cup Duck. I nearly forgot the important part, against the FFA Cup Seagull. Thank you to 13 people that voted with 53.8% of the vote, as you guys can see on your screen now. The FFA Cup Seagull has been inducted. It was, of course, I think the FFA Cup final of 2016, maybe. I've got that year wrong. We'll see. Danny Vukovic playing a pass out from the back knocked a Seagull unconscious. It was thankfully revived and nursed back to health before it flew away to go and eat a bunch of chips in row F. But a worthy adversary, I guess, a worthy inductee more than anything else, but it thankfully does bring me back. I think I'm one behind you now in terms of overall inductees that have taken place at this stage, but it's still early days, so I'm sure I can catch you up.
Well, yeah, there we go. I mean, two very worthy inductees. Two very worthy nominees. I don't think it would have been wrong for either of them to get inducted. I don't think it's a great travesty. Geez, can't even talk. I'm so riled up that Croat Patak didn't make it in. It's sad, but that's all right, mate. That's all right, because we've got another round to go. We're nominating again. You go first.
Oh, there's only one person that we could nominate this week, and it's got to be Josh Cavallo. I think the announcement, the way he put himself together, the way he's carried himself since, I think was absolutely fantastic. I hope it is a watershed moment in Australian sport, not just Australian football, that people look back on as being like a really defining moment. I think he deserves a ton of credit. I think Adelaide deserves a ton of credit. I don't think we can go past Josh Cavallo this week, but if you've got another nomination, then I'm absolutely fine to put that forward as well.
I don't think it would be fair to nominate someone against him, if that makes sense. Like, I agree. I think another thing that's worth pointing out is, there have been a lot of gay female role models in football throughout the world. And Josh Cavallo is, now the first openly active male gay role model that, is there within the community. So I think it's good to see. It's fantastic to see, and as you said, down the road we go, well, why is this news? But the fact that he is the first, the fact that, when you think about, that it's 2021, how many role models we see in the women's side of the sport as well, the fact that he's the first male is phenomenal. The fact that it's taken this long, but, full credit to him, I think, yeah, straight in.
Straight in, easy. We'll still put a vote up, but it'll just be Josh Cavallo by Shaun or Josh Cavallo by Brand, because we have to declare.
Here we go.
One of us has to be a winner this week. I can't handle it any further, but yeah, definitely a worthy inductee. That does take us in to our next season preview, Western Sydney Wanderers. They, of course, have had some very, very ups, very highs in their history. I saw more and more people throughout the course of this week like retweeting their videos from the Asian Champions League win. Not that they ever mentioned that at any point. They always keep it pretty tight-lidded on that one. They've also, I think, had some good memories in the early seasons of the A-League as they were propped up by the FFA, but recently not had the best seasons. They've had quite a few different things that I think they wish had gone differently, or that I think they wish they could have done better. They finished in 8th spot last season, only 4 points off finals, because it was a very tight finals race heading into the final season, or heading into the last part of the year. But again, very vaunted at the start of last season, and we're probably going to have a lot of the similar conversations when we preview them here, where they had quite a good squad. They were super aggressive in terms of pursuing targets that were contracted to other clubs. Carl Robinson was very aggressive in getting the players and calling out in public when he felt there were areas that he didn't have the players that he necessarily wanted in.
Well, also, just quickly on Carl Robinson before the club were aggressive in going out and signing him.
Very true.
Like he was contracted with the Jets and then said, "No, do you know what? I'm off to Western Sydney." So that aggressiveness in itself was pretty unprecedented.
And I think how aggressive they were, they probably would have been expecting more than an 8th place finish, to be completely honest. But they did still have some season highlights. They had some good performances. They had players again during the mid-season that I think turned around their year a little bit. For you, Bran, what do you think their season highlight would have been last year, and what are they going to try and replicate a little bit more this season?
Well, I think the season highlight comes down to one particular game. It was a 4-3 win against the team we were talking about before, Wellington Phoenix, sorry, beg your pardon. Put me in the bin. What an idiot. Why did I say Wellington United? No idea. Wellington Phoenix. It was a fantastic game. It was like, when we talk about peak A-League, that generally has some, negative connotations about it, but this was peak A-League for all the right reasons. It was 4-3, it was thrilling. I think it was the Knicks took the lead each time, and Western Sydney pegged them back in succession. So they were just trading goals there. The standout goal was, I think it was, who was it? Sorry, Mitch Duke. That's right. Scored an absolute belter. Wellington converted a penalty to go up 3-2. It was like less than 2 minutes later. There was a long ball, chest control from Mitch Duke, and an absolute stonker of a volley into the top corner, equalised, and then Kwame Yeboah 20 minutes later was able to go ahead and cap off a remarkable victory with a great goal to give Western Sydney the win. So I thought that was probably the highlight, because that was just a phenomenal game. Their last 2 goals in particular were ridiculous. But yeah, I think it sort of showcased I agree when you were talking about their season last year. I think it was frustrating. I think there was a lot of hype around Carl Robinson. There was a lot of hype about some of the players he was able to bring in, but they just weren't able to execute. So I think that was their highlight, that particular game. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I'd go along with that. I think they also got better as the season got on, or it looked like they were really getting the players that they wanted for their system. Mitch Duke, you already mentioned, they also signed Steven Ugarkovic during the year last year. He was a player that they pursued during the off-season when he was at Newcastle, which... Bernie Beanie again, there's a whole bunch of different stuff you kind of say positively and negatively to that. But they do have, again, a highly vaunted squad this offseason. So let's kind of recap that as quickly as we can. So the players out, Dylan Mcgowan has departed. Bruce Kamau has departed, who last season was one of their best players and I think finished as their leading scorer. Costa Grossos has departed. Mohamed Altay, who's now signed for Newcastle Jets. Nikolai Mueller, who's made the move to Central Coast Mariners. Patrick Ziegler, a highly vaunted German youth international on Football Manager. He's an absolute beast, in case you're wondering. Scott McDonald has departed. He's now taken up a coaching role with Gold Coast United in the Queensland NPL. Noah James has departed. Graham Dorans returns to Scotland. I thought he was excellent last season, a big loss for them. Jordan Much, who's another of the players that joined them during the season last year, ex-Crystal Palace midfielder. And Costa Grossos is so nice, Brand, that you've put him on there twice. So he's obviously another name that has left as well. But some huge outs there. Dylan Mcgowan was their captain at the start of last season. Graham Dorans did wear the armband at various points throughout the year. And we should also call out as well Mitch Duke departing the end of his loan spell. He returns to, I think he's now in the J League 2. Does that sound right? Questions on a postcard, let us know in the comment section below if I butchered that one, but he's obviously departed the club at the end of his loan spell as well. But of those players out, Bran, who do you think looms the largest and who's the toughest one for them to try and replace this year?
Just very quickly, Mitch Duke is in the second division in Japan. Very well done there, Shaun. Well, he's a big out. We've seen him playing for the Socceroos, and he's obviously been scoring for them. So I think that's a big play there. Bruce Kamau again. It seems that a lot of teams this year have lost their leading goal scorers. I feel like in almost every season preview we said, yep, they're losing their top goal scorer from last year. That's going to be hard to replace. But of course, yes, that is going to be an area that they want to address. Scott McDonald, I guess. I think, that sort of veteran presence. What about you? What stands out to you? There's not, to me, one particular player where I go, that is a massive loss, other than maybe Mitch Duke, but then, him coming back on a loan spell. What do you think?
I thought Graham
Duke, sorry, just very quickly, that always seemed like it was going to be temporary. So even then, it doesn't seem like a massive loss. It seemed like the short time that he spent with the club was bonus time, at least to me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he was brought in to try and solve an issue because they really couldn't get the best out of Yeboah. And Yeboah, of course, we've left out as well. He's retired to become a model. We completely forgot about that one. I could do a whole podcast on that, but we'll leave it for the moment. But Yeboah and Abini, they couldn't quite get on the same page. They really couldn't figure it out. This is the challenge, right? Carl Robinson got to put together his own squad last season. He inherited a bit, but he did have time to bring in his own players and then was super aggressive about bringing players in from other clubs that he wanted and club players that he'd worked with before. He's been super aggressive again this offseason. So I don't know how many more windows he gets to put together his team because a lot of those players that we kind of mentioned are players that he actually brought in. There's only a few that he inherited. I thought Graham Dorans was excellent last season. I thought he was probably one of Western Sydney's best, the Scottish midfielder, playing in a deeper role than what I think he wanted to be in. I think he viewed himself, and correctly so, because he played with West Bromwich and he played in the Championship and he played in the Scottish Premier League as well, in further forward positions, wide areas, playing as a number 10, whatever else, but he really fulfilled that number 6 position until they were able to add Ugarkovic. So I think he's a big one for them. And then, there's a couple other players like Bruce Kamau was excellent. He's now playing in second division Greece. He's made the jump over to Crete, I think it is. Dylan Mcgowan is their captain, much derided, wasn't the best, but I think some of that is he gets left in the lurch by their system, and their 3 at the back and 2 wing backs has kind of created a lot for them. So, yeah, there's a few big players out, but players in is quite interesting. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So, first 3 joining on scholarship contracts, Alex Badalato, Nectar Triantis, and Jared Carluccio. Apologies if I butchered any pronunciations, but they get upgraded from academy prospects to the first team. Western Sydney spent a ton of money on their academy structure over the last few years. They will start trying to bring through more players like they did last season with Daniel Wilmering, Mark Nader, a few of the other youngsters that they developed throughout the course of that period. Rami Nazarene, who we of course saw at Melbourne City and last season on loan at Newcastle Jets, perhaps a bit of an underwhelming or disappointing spell at Newcastle last season. It looked like he was going to be the main man for them and struggled with form and fitness at various points. Adama Traore comes up for Melbourne Victory, previously talked about as being potential Socceroos left back, full Ivory Coast international back in the day as well. Tamer Hamed, we already mentioned, jumps across from Wellington Phoenix. Rhys Williams returns from a spell in the Middle East after previously playing at Perth Glory and at Melbourne Victory in the league as well. Terry Antonis comes back from the J-League. Johnny Katrumbas comes across from Newcastle Jets, and Dimitri Petratos comes in on loan from Saudi Arabia. So some big names in that lineup, Ran. Particularly, you look at Hamed, Williams, Antonis, Petratos, all players with proven track records in this league. All
And
players,
Traore.
and Traore as well, to an extent. I don't know how good he was. I keep just get flashbacks to his red card in the Melbourne Derby last season when he lost his rag a little bit. But some huge names there. Who do you think looms largest as being a big player in for Western Sydney?
I think Rami Najarine is going to be exciting. I think, as you said, we saw him with Melbourne City, and so obviously we got to see a little bit more of him. But he was very exciting. You know, he was more highly touted than Daniel Arzani at one stage as well. So again, what does that mean? Don't know, but that says something, right? I think he struggled last year at Newcastle. Fair enough. Newcastle were pretty darn woeful, so it's tough to succeed in a struggling side. And as the injuries, as you said, so going to a team where there's more of a squad around him, I think he will thrive. I think he needed playing time. Obviously, wasn't getting that at City. I think he needed support, wasn't getting that at Newcastle. I think he's going to get both in Western Sydney. So I think he will have a very good campaign. And then some of those other veterans that you mentioned with proven track records of being successful in the A-League men, it's good, you know, like maybe Petratos and Traore might be a little bit past it, and Antonis as well. So maybe they're slightly on the wrong side. They're on the decline. However, I don't know. They're pretty big names. And Hamed as well. We saw him able to make an impact with the Knicks. But what do you think of Traore, Petratos, Antonis? How excited for those three do you think Western Sydney can be? Are they potentially expecting too much?
I think they suit the so this is the challenge with Western City. They play the same shape and formation no matter what. They play that 5-3-2, whether it's working or whether they're getting absolutely belted. There was a game, I think they were 3-0 down in the first half away at Melbourne City last season when everyone was kind of screaming on Twitter for them to just do something different. And they didn't. They just kept going with that same 5-3-2, even though it was clearly not working for them on the day. I think all the players they brought in suit that. I don't know if Adama Traore is eventually going to be a left-sided centre-back or if he's going to be a left wing-back competing with Daniel Wilmering, who I thought was excellent last season. I think Rhys Williams is a huge get. I think he's a very good defender, had a long career at Middlesbrough, was excellent at both Victory and Perth in the A-League as well, comes back having played quite regularly in Saudi Arabia, so I think he's probably the biggest of the lot. Hamed should just play up front with Bernie Abini. You would think that's pretty straightforward, like-for-like change with Mitch Duke. And then Terry Antonis I look as being a pretty like-for-like change with Graham Dorrans. And Dimitri,
You know what I just realised?
What?
So just very quick, Terry Antonis, I had James Troisi in my head. When I said he's a bit old, potentially past it, I had James Troisi in my head, not Terry Antonis.
I was going to let you get away with it and just let the comments tear you apart. But yeah, look, Antonis and Petratos.
Yeah, so I got that wrong. Jimmy Petratos is only 28 as well. Jeez, if you told me he was 33, I would have absolutely believed you.
He's been around a long time.
Exactly. So, and again, my bad, yeah. Terry Antonis, I was thinking James Troisi. So ignore all my comments on Terry Antonis because he's only 27 as well. So actually, when I said they had some quite older signings, not quite true. So there we go. Ignore that. My bad.
No, it's all good. And like you look at, you'd think Yagarkovic, Alanka, Antonis is more of a box-to-box player, Petratos is a number 10. That is an improvement on what they had last year. But is it as good or competitive as some of the other midfields in the league? I'm not entirely sure. And is that structure right for them? We'll jump forward a little bit, right? Coaches and captains, Carl Robinson and their captain is to be confirmed. I'd be surprised if it's not Rhys Williams, given how much he's all across all of their kit releases and all that sort of stuff. And basically anything they put up is with him. There's no second chances or third chances, I think, for Carl Robinson. If they don't have a successful season this year, given that he's had 2 years to build his own squad, I think they'd move into a different direction because they've spent all this time, all this money developing a world-class academy structure to really try and compete with, I think Melbourne City has the best one at the moment, but really get a level of facilities, a level of academy that is equal to that. If he can't do that, having recruited some of the big names that he's got this season, then he's clearly not pulling in the same direction that I think the club is planning for in the long term. So, yeah, it's going to be a big one for them. But, yeah, what is some of your thoughts on Carl Robinson as a manager and what do you expect for him this season?
There's a lot of pressure on him. There was a lot of pressure on him last season as well, which I thought was maybe a little bit harsh. You know, it was his first season in charge, and maybe some of that pressure was because of the names that they were able to bring in, you know, and that's understandable. However, like in his first season, there was already, you know, Western Sydney fans calling for his head saying, you know, that his job's on the line, that he should potentially be out. And at least from the outside, that seemed harsh to me. You know, it's like his first year at the club. While he was able to make signings, they were sort of stopgap measures, I guess, you know, sort of top-up pieces. He wasn't able to totally transform the squad. He was just able to make, you know, little additions. So I think this year, though, that same excuse won't quite fly. He has been able to reshape the squad, as we've, you know, already discussed here. So he's been able to have more of an imprint on that. So, I mean, Wanderers fans want success. You know, you said at the start, they keep talking about, you know, being Asian Champions League champions, which is, of course, a huge draw. You know, that's a huge achievement, but they've not really been that successful in the league apart from, what was it, their inaugural, their second season. They've always sort of been in Sydney's shadow. So we've seen City sort of take that step out from the Victory's shadow to become, you know, the big dogs in the city. Western Sydney want to do the same. So there's definitely a ton of pressure on them this year because, again, I think those players that they've been able to bring in, Antonis, when you don't think he's James Troisi, that, you know, changes things quite a lot. And Petratos, I think he's been underwhelming in his recent stints back in the A-League men. But again, you know, we know the talent's there. So if he can fire, then I think Western Sydney should be very, very good. I mean, it's finals or bust, surely.
Absolutely. Now, I've just noticed the note that you put in for the membership pitch as well. Do you want to talk us through your membership pitch for any Western Sydney fans that aren't signed up and on board yet?
Well, a big one is they have awesome kits. And, you know, we did our kit show and it was a little bit tough when we got to Western Sydney because they only had the one. They only had their home kit out, which I think we agreed is pretty good. You know, like it's the black and red stripes. Western Sydney as well have really sort of embraced that kit culture sort of philosophy where it's more of a fashion trend, not just something that you wear on a football pitch. It's something you can wear out and about. And their kits are belters this year. Their home kit's really, really good. Their away kit is clean. I would liken it to Melbourne City and the sash, where it's just sort of that old design that is sort of iconic or symbolic with the club. And they've brought it back. So I think that's really good. The white and red, I really like it personally. Then what is it? Their goalkeeper kit that's got sort of the rainbow streak diagonals across it. That's really, really cool. And their third kit as well has a funky pattern on it as well and doesn't seem to be much of a template. So their four kits that they've got there are all really cool. So, I mean, they might not look good on the park in terms of footballing product, but they will look good in terms of visually. So small wins there, right?
It's as good a reason as any, Branson, and they're good kits.
They might not look good. They might not look good on the park, but they're going to look good on the park, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and they'll look good off the park, and they'll look good wherever you happen to wear it. If you've got $400 odd bucks to cash out on four kits, but they're very good offerings, and I guess that's the danger between us doing the kit review so early in the preseason. They do start their season though with the Sydney Derby against Sydney FC on Saturday the 20th at 7:45 p.m. Please get yourself vaccinated, get along to that match if you can. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. But another tough one for us to try and put into this power ranking structure, Branson. So we've got them down in 8th spot at the moment, but we will move them up and down. You've mentioned that it's finals or bust. Do you think they have what it takes to get into those top 6 teams? And where would you position them against the other sides in this lineup at the moment?
I think they should have what it takes to get into the finals. Whether or not they will, I mean, obviously we'll see. But on paper, they should. I definitely think they're above Wellington. I definitely think they're above the Mariners. I think if you compare them to Adelaide and Brisbane, I would probably say Western Sydney seem to be more complete. What do you think? Like Brisbane and Adelaide, there seems to be a few more gaps to fill, whereas Western Sydney seem a little bit more rounded to me. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think they're top 5, but it's where do they sit in that top 5 for me. So if I'm comparing them to Adelaide, I think Adelaide still need to find goals because they've lost Tommy Urich. I think and Western Sydney should have that in Hamed and Abini. I think that maybe just puts them above Adelaide. I think Brisbane have the bones of what could be a very good side, but perhaps not as well resourced. We talked about where their goals are going to come from. And
again, they've lost Danzaki as well,
They've lost Danzaki. They've brought in Lascano, who could be fantastic for them if he can find 10 goals this season. They've got Ivanovic as well up from Sydney. But Potentially on paper right now, their squad is better than Brisbane's overall, the starting 11s, if we compare them. And I'd potentially put them above Macarthur as well. I don't think Western Sydney are a top 4 side. I think potentially they do get top 6. But at the moment, looking at their off-season recruitment, what they've done, how those players fit into that 5-3-2 that we know that they're going to play because they played it every round last week, I think they've done pretty well. So I'm potentially thinking somewhere between 3rd and 4th. I don't think they're close to Sydney yet. I don't think they're close to Melbourne City, just how stable those two clubs have been. But I could potentially make an argument for putting them above Macarthur.
I don't think they're above Macarthur. I think they just seem like the players that they've got, the ins that they've got, they just seem like a bit of a mega team on paper. For me, Macarthur. And again, the game's not played on paper, so we'll see how that plays out. But I just think to put them above Macarthur would be a stretch, in my opinion. Again, like we say on paper, that Western Sydney are better than Brisbane and Adelaide. Two sides that both finished above them last year on the table. I don't think they're better than Macarthur on paper. So if we've got them ranked above other two on paper, I've never said on paper that many times in that short a period of time either. I think 4. Yeah, but 4, 5, 6, throw a blanket over them, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. We'll go with 4 because if you were to line up their squads on FIFA, there's more noticeable gaps, I think, in Brisbane and Adelaide at the moment, but there are still 2 weeks to sign more players. So who knows what's going to happen in that respect. And Brisbane could have stars coming through from the NPL Queensland level like they did last season. It's going to be an interesting one, and I think it's definitely going to continue to be interesting as we jump into some of the teams that we've got coming up over the next 2 weeks as well. But sadly, Branson, that brings us to an end for another week. We've gotten through our hour relatively quickly. I'm sure we could have spoken about a few of these topics in much greater depth and much greater length, but as always with football, there's a million different things that we're trying to fit into a particular week. Thanks as always.
We're trying to be more timely as well.
We are trying to be more timely. We're trying to give people back just quality content over an hour rather than 90 minutes of me just faffing around trying to figure out how an Excel sheet works. But Bran, if people want to check out more of your stuff, where's the best place to find you?
You can find me on Twitter, mate, at Branson Gibson. Branson spelled Bransen. But yeah, give me a follow.
Yeah, and otherwise, just check out the French Island Football Association because we do retweet a bunch of your stuff, Branson, whenever you're tweeting about the Astros or the Chiefs or whatever happens to come up in Fulham's results on a particular weekend. So,
hey, 7-0 this morning.
7-0.
Got to get it in. I'm wearing a Fulham kit. 7-0.
If only they could just stay in the championship where they're a good team and not come up promoted at any point. That's the challenge we need to overcome. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. We do very much appreciate it. Let us know if you're enjoying it or if there's anything that you guys want to see in the comment section below. Check us out on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel over here on YouTube. Follow us over on Patreon if you want a chance to win a French Island kit before Christmas. But more than anything, we just appreciate you guys listening along with us. I've been Shaun, he's been Bran, and we'll see you all again on the island.